One stormy night, a struggling single mom opened her door to a drenched stranger, only to realize it was Keanu Reeves, terrified and running from forces that would stop at nothing to silence him. Why was Hollywood's most humble star hiding in her tiny apartment, and how could her kindness change the world forever? Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The alarm clock screamed at 5:30 a.m., breaking through the silence of Hazel Thompson's tiny Austin apartment. She rolled over, groaning as her body reminded her of the hours she had spent on her feet the day before. Her lower back throbbed, her shoulders ached, and her hands were cracked from years of scrubbing with harsh cleaning chemicals. The sheets clung to her, begging her to stay in bed, but Hazel knew there was no choice. She had bills stacked on the counter and an 8-year-old daughter who would be waking soon, needing breakfast and reassurance before school. Hazel swung her legs off the bed and planted her feet on the cold floor. The soles of her shoes, worn thin from endless shifts, sat waiting by the door. They were scuffed, faded, and starting to split at the edges, but buying new ones wasn't in the budget this month. Rent came first. Electricity, too, and Lily always needed something for school. Whether it was a field trip fee, a new set of markers, or simply shoes that actually fit her growing feet, Hazel would go without before letting her daughter feel the weight of sacrifice. She padded into the small kitchen, the linoleum floor curling at the edges. The fridge hummed, nearly empty except for a carton of milk, half a loaf of bread, and some leftover soup. It wasn't much, but Hazel would make it stretch. She always did. She brewed herself a cup of coffee, thick and bitter, the kind that could burn its way down to her bones and keep her awake during the long shifts at Rosie's Diner. Sue made Rosie's Diner, that diner uniform, pink polyester with Rosie's stitched in red above the pocket, hung neatly ironed on the back of a chair. The fabric had faded from years of washings, but Hazel made sure it was spotless. She might not own much, but she believed in dignity, in showing up ready to work even when life tried to grind her down. Before waking Lily, Hazel let herself pause in the quiet of the kitchen. She thought about her late mother, a woman who had raised her on the same kind of grit and determination. "We might not have much," her mother used to say, "but we always have kindness. That's something no one can take away." Hazel clung to those words like scripture. They shaped every decision she made, every time she chose patience over bitterness, every time she smiled through exhaustion for the sake of her daughter. As the coffee warmed her hands, Hazel glanced at the small window above the sink. Dark clouds were already thickening on the horizon, heavy and low. The weatherman had said a storm was coming, one of the worst of the season. Hazel couldn't help but wonder if life was about to get even harder. Hazel set her mug down and moved quietly toward the small bedroom at the end of the narrow hallway. Pushing the door open with care, she peeked inside. There, curled beneath a thin blanket, lay Lily. Her daughter's dark curls spilled across the pillow, one arm wrapped tightly around her stuffed rabbit. A toy so loved its fur had grown patchy. For a moment, Hazel just stood in the doorway, her heart swelling with love and worry all at once. Lily was her reason for every late night, every aching bone, every forced smile at rude customers who treated her like she was invisible. "Morning, sunshine," Hazel whispered softly. She brushed her daughter's hair back from her forehead. Lily stirred, blinking sleepily, then smiled as she recognized the familiar voice. "5 more minutes," she mumbled, clutching her rabbit closer. Hazel laughed under her breath, remembering how her own mother used to say the same thing when Hazel was a child. For a brief second, it almost felt like the circle of life was kinder than it usually was, but reality intruded quickly. Hazel knew she couldn't let her daughter linger in bed. The school bus wouldn't wait, and she needed to get to work. "Come on, sweetheart, breakfast first. You've got a big day ahead." She helped Lily sit up, tucking the rabbit back into bed so it could rest, until she came home. Together, they shuffled to the kitchen, where Hazel toasted the last slices of bread and poured cereal into a chipped bowl. As Lily ate, Hazel packed her daughter's worn backpack, a folder with homework, a snack wrapped carefully in foil, and a small note she had scribbled before bed the night before. Just a line telling Lily she loved her and was proud of her. Hazel believed those notes mattered, even if they seemed small. When the world pressed down too hard, children needed to hear they were enough. Lily finished her cereal and looked up with a mischievous smile. "Do you think the storm will cancel school, Mom?" Hazel shook her head, brushing crumbs from the table. "I don't think so, honey. We're tough Texans. A little rain won't stop us." But even as she said it, her eyes drifted back toward the window where the sky seemed to grow heavier by the minute. She tried to push away the unease, focusing instead on the moment at hand. After all, she had learned long ago that worrying didn't pay the bills, only hard work did. Yet deep in her chest, she felt something tightening, a sense that the storm rolling in wasn't just another inconvenience. Something was changing, and her life, already fragile, might soon be caught in winds far stronger than anything she had ever known. By 6:30 a.m., Hazel was already slipping into her diner uniform. The pink fabric scratched against her skin, stiff from too many washes, but she smoothed it down with practiced hands. She pinned her hair back, wiped a smudge of mascara from under her eyes, and looked at her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror. The face staring back at her seemed older than 32, not because of years, but because of worry. Fine lines traced her forehead, shadows lingered beneath her eyes, and her lips pressed thin from holding back words she never had the energy to say. She sighed, then straightened her shoulders. She couldn't afford to dwell on exhaustion. She had to be the version of herself Lily believed in, the version that could handle anything. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door knocked softly, poking her head in to greet Hazel and Lily. She was the one who helped get Lily ready for school when Hazel left early. Without her, Hazel would never make it to work on time. Hazel thanked her quickly and stepped into the humid morning air. The streets of Austin were quiet, only the hum of traffic breaking the stillness. Hazel walked fast, her shoes slapping against wet pavement. The clouds above churned, heavy and low, promising a downpour. There was an eerie hush, as if the city itself was waiting for something to break. She clutched her thin jacket tighter and forced her thoughts back to work. Rosie's diner would already be buzzing with truck drivers and office workers who wanted hot coffee and eggs. Hazel had learned to endure their impatience, their short tempers, their dismissive glances. Each folded tip meant rent paid, groceries bought, a school trip Lily wouldn't have to miss. Every insult swallowed was another step across the tightrope she walked each day. And yet, Hazel held on to kindness. Her mother's words lived inside her. "We don't always have money, Hazel, but we have kindness. That is richer than gold." When Rosa, her co-worker, broke down over her sick child, Hazel slipped her last $20 into Rosa's pocket. When the homeless man outside asked for food, Hazel handed him a sandwich without hesitation. She had little, but she believed kindness made it enough. Still, there were nights when silence pressed in on the apartment, and she wondered if things would ever change. She whispered promises to herself, promises that Lily would not grow up with the same chains of fear and struggle, that somehow she would carve out something better for her daughter. But promises didn't pay bills, and the storm clouds gathering above seemed to echo the doubts she carried. Hazel pulled her jacket tight as the first drops of rain tapped against her skin, cold, sharp, insistent. She lifted her eyes to the sky, watching as the darkness thickened. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice told her this storm wasn't just weather. It was a sign. A warning that her ordinary struggles were only the beginning. Something was coming. Something that would test her in ways she could never imagine. By the time Hazel pushed through the back door of Rosie's diner, the morning rush was already in full swing. The clatter of plates, The hiss of bacon on the grill and the sharp ring of the bell from the cook filled the small space. Hazel tied on her apron, smoothed her uniform, and slipped into her role as though her aching body didn't exist. "Table 6 wants extra bacon," Rosa called, already juggling 3 trays. "And table 3 says the coffee's cold again." Hazel grabbed the heavy pot and hurried across the diner floor, weaving between crowded booths. The businessman at table 3 barely glanced up when she apologized and poured him a fresh cup. "About time," he muttered, tapping at his phone. "Some of us have important jobs to get to." Hazel swallowed her sting of pride and forced a smile. If only he knew. Raising a child alone, holding 2 jobs just to scrape by, wasn't that important? But she had learned to let the comments roll off her like rain on glass. Every dollar counted, and pride didn't keep the lights on. By noon, the diner TV, a bulky old box mounted above the counter, caught her attention. The weatherman's voice cut through the noise of clattering dishes. "A major storm system is approaching Austin this afternoon. Heavy rainfall, flash flooding, and possible tornadoes. This could be the worst we've seen in years. Residents are advised to head home early and stay indoors." Hazel's heart sank. Storms meant schools often sent kids home early, and Lily's school was across town. She tried to focus on balancing her tray, but the worry gnawed at her. At 2 o'clock, her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She stepped into the hallway by the bathrooms and answered, breathless. "Mrs. Thompson, this is the front office at Lily's school. We're dismissing students early due to the storm. Can you pick her up?" Hazel's chest tightened. "I'm at work until 4. Can she stay until then?" "I'm sorry, ma'am," the secretary said firmly. "All staff are leaving at 2:30. You'll need to come now, or arrange for someone else to pick her up." Hazel glanced back through the swinging door. Rosa was swamped, the cook yelling for plates, customers growing restless. But her daughter came first. She knew the cost before she even spoke. "I'll come," she said softly, already untying her apron. Hazel stepped back into the chaos of the diner and found her boss, Mr. Pete, balancing receipts at the register. His frown deepened as soon as he saw her without her apron. "I have to go," Hazel said quickly before he could scold. "The school's closing. Lily's waiting for me." Mr. Pete's face hardened. "Hazel, look around. We're slammed. If you walk out now, don't bother coming back tomorrow." The words hit her like a blow. Her stomach dropped, but her decision was already made. She could survive losing a job, but she couldn't survive losing her daughter's trust. "I understand," she whispered, setting her apron on the counter. Without another word, she slipped out the door. The air outside had changed. The stillness she noticed earlier was gone, replaced by gusts of wind that whipped her hair across her face. The sky had darkened into a bruised purple, and the first fat drops of rain began to fall, spattering against the pavement. Hazel broke into a run, her thin shoes slapping the wet concrete. The diner was 6 blocks from Lily's school, and each step felt heavier with the storm pressing down. By the time she reached the building, rain streaked her uniform, and her breath came in ragged gasps. Inside, Lily sat in the front office, clutching her backpack straps. Her eyes lit up the moment she saw her mother. "Mommy," she cried, running into Hazel's arms. "The teacher said there might be tornadoes." Hazel smoothed her daughter's damp curls and kissed her cheek. "Don't worry, baby. We're going home right now." But when they stepped outside, Hazel's confidence wavered. The clouds had taken on a sickly green tint, the kind of color that made the air itself feel wrong. The wind had grown sharp, tearing at their clothes as sheets of rain came pouring down. Thunder cracked, so loud it made Lily flinch and press her face against Hazel's side. Hazel gripped her daughter's hand tightly. "Run!" she shouted over the roar of the storm. Together they sprinted down the sidewalk, water splashing up to their knees as gutters overflowed. Lightning split the sky again and again, the flash so close Hazel could see every raindrop suspended in air. Ahead, their apartment building loomed. 2 blocks away, salvation just within reach. Hazel pushed Lily forward as they splashed through rising puddles, her heart hammered with every thunderclap. The wind was so fierce it snatched the breath from her lungs. Her thin jacket clung to her body, soaked through in seconds. She focused on the apartment building ahead, but the world around them seemed to tilt and twist with the storm's fury. "Almost there," she shouted, though her words were stolen by the wind. Lily clung to her hand, her small legs pumping furiously to keep up. For all her fear, the little girl's grip was strong, reminding Hazel why she couldn't falter. Then Hazel saw him. The armadillo at the corner of the street, half hidden by the torrent of rain, a sleek black car sat stranded, hazard lights blinking weakly. Beside it stood a man in a soaked suit, his dark hair plastered against his forehead. He looked around desperately, one hand pressing against the useless hood of the car, as though urging it to start by willpower alone. His shoulders were hunched, his figure trembling, though not just from the cold. There was something in the way he scanned the empty street, like an animal, cornered, waiting for predators. Hazel's instinct was to keep going. She had her own problems. She had just walked away from her job, unsure how she would pay rent. Her daughter needed safety more than a stranger needed help with a broken car. Yet as lightning lit up the man's face, Hazel froze. Recognition hit her like another bolt from the storm. She knew that face. Everyone knew that face. It was Keanu Reeves. Her breath caught, but it wasn't his fame that stopped her in her tracks. It was his expression. In his eyes was not the controlled calm she had seen in movies or interviews, but raw, unguarded terror. He wasn't just stranded in a storm, he was running from something. Or someone. "Mommy, we have to hurry," Lily cried, tugging at her hand. Hazel nodded quickly, torn between instinct and compassion. She could run past, pretend she hadn't seen him, but her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "We don't always have money, Hazel, but we always have kindness." Her decision was made. Hazel turned toward the man, raising her voice above the thunder. "Sir, you'll get hurt out here. Come with us." For a moment, Keanu didn't move, his gaze flicking down the street as though expecting shadows to appear. Then another crack of lightning split the sky, closer than before, and he stumbled toward them. Hazel saw his hands trembling, his suit jacket torn at the sleeve, as if from a struggle. They reached the entrance to Hazel's apartment building. Her fingers fumbled with the keys, slick with rain. Behind her, Lily clung to her waist, while Keanu glanced back over his shoulder. His chest heaving like every second in the open put him closer to danger. Finally, the lock clicked. Hazel shoved the door open, ushering them inside. The three of them collapsed into the dim stairwell, dripping water onto the cracked tile floor. The howling of the storm was muffled by the walls, but Hazel's heart still pounded in her ears. "Thank you," the man said at last, his voice low and hoarse. His eyes searched hers, as though still unsure if he was safe. "You didn't have to stop." "Of course I did," Hazel replied, breathless. "That's what people do." Her words were automatic, yet she felt their weight settle heavily on her shoulders. She hadn't just offered shelter to a stranger in a storm. She had invited someone and something into her fragile world, and the consequences were already pressing against the walls of her little home. Hazel steadied herself, pulling Lily closer. She could feel the storm outside growing worse, but what terrified her more was the storm she had just let through her door. The rain poured down with such force it felt like the whole sky was collapsing. Hazel clutched Lily's hand tightly, the little girl's small fingers trembling in hers as they ran through the sheets of water. The storm howled around them, lightning tearing the night open with blinding flashes. Hazel's heart raced, not only from the weather, but from the gnawing fear of not making it back to the apartment safely. Then, in the middle of the downpour, she saw him. A man stood by the roadside, his car's hood lifted, steam rising into the wet night. He looked stranded, his shoulders hunched against the rain, a figure caught in the chaos of the storm. Hazel froze for just a moment, torn. Instinct screamed at her to keep moving. She had Lily to protect. Every second outside felt dangerous, but there was another voice inside her, softer yet stronger, the voice her mother had instilled in her, kindness above all else. She hesitated, her breath sharp in her chest. She couldn't ignore the stranger, not when he looked so utterly lost, so vulnerable. Her stomach twisted with fear, but she raised her voice anyway, shouting over the roar of rain, "Come inside before the storm hurts you!" The man turned. Even from several yards away, Hazel could see his face pale in the intermittent glow of lightning. His eyes darted to the shadows around him, scanning like he was expecting something, or someone. That look alone chilled her. For a second, she thought he might refuse. He looked torn, as if weighing whether stepping into her home might drag danger to her doorstep. But then another burst of thunder split the night, and he nodded quickly, dropping the useless hood of the car and rushing toward them. Hazel pulled Lily closer as the man joined them, and together they sprinted through the flooded street toward her building. The stairwell smelled of damp concrete, and every step echoed with urgency. By the time they shoved through her apartment door, dripping water across the worn linoleum, Hazel's chest was heaving. It wasn't until she lit a candle on the counter and turned to look at him clearly that the shock truly hit. She knew that face. It was Keanu Reeves. For a moment, Hazel couldn't breathe. The flickering candlelight painted his features in trembling gold, and there was no mistaking him. She had seen that face 100 times on posters at the movies, across television screens, in interviews. Keanu Reeves stood in her shabby kitchen, drenched to the bone, water dripping from his dark hair onto the floor. His chest rose and fell quickly, as though he'd been running for miles before the storm caught him. Hazel's mind spun. She wanted to ask 100 questions, but her tongue felt heavy. What was a world-famous actor doing stranded in Austin, alone, in the middle of a storm? And why had he looked over his shoulder like someone was chasing him? Lily broke the silence first, her voice small but wide-eyed with awe. "Mom, that's him. That's Keanu Reeves." She said it like she was naming a superhero who had just stepped out of a comic book. The man managed a faint smile, but there was no arrogance in it, no trace of a star who lived for admiration. He looked exhausted, almost fragile, and his voice came out soft. "Thank you for letting me in." His tone carried gratitude, yet something in it trembled, fear that went deeper than the storm raging outside. Hazel found her voice at last. "You're soaked through. Sit down. I'll get you a towel." She moved quickly, almost mechanically, pulling one from the linen closet and handing it to him. Her thoughts clashed. Half of her wanted to demand an explanation. The other half wanted to shield Lily and shut out whatever danger had followed this man to her door. Keanu took the towel with shaking hands and pressed it against his face, sighing like even that small comfort was a gift. The shadows around his eyes made him look older, wearier than she expected. Hazel's gaze flicked toward Lily, who hadn't stopped staring, her innocence mixing with concern. Hazel's instincts screamed that something was wrong, that this wasn't just a movie star caught in bad weather. And as another gust of wind rattled the windows, she noticed his eyes. Deep, restless, and filled with a fear that had nothing to do with the storm outside. Hazel couldn't shake the unease creeping up her spine. The man sitting in her kitchen was Keanu Reeves, a face known around the world, yet he looked nothing like the untouchable star on screens. His soaked shirt clung to his frame, and his hands trembled slightly, as if the storm had carved its way inside him. Something about the way he kept glancing toward the window made Hazel's chest tighten. He wasn't just lost in the rain, he was running from something. Her mind raced through possibilities. Stalker? Paparazzi? Maybe even fans gone too far. But no. The way he had looked over his shoulder before entering, the way his jaw clenched at every gust of wind, spoke of something darker. He was hiding, and Hazel had just brought him into her home, into her daughter's world. Lily, still curled on the couch with a blanket, whispered, as if afraid to break the fragile quiet. "Why does he look so scared, Mom?" Her words echoed Hazel's own thoughts, and she forced a steady smile. The storm's rough. Anyone would be shaken. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. Storms didn't put that kind of fear in a man's eyes. Keanu finally broke the silence, his voice low but steady. "I'm sorry for intruding. I didn't know where else to go." His gaze lingered on Hazel, searching, as if gauging whether he could trust her with something unspoken. Hazel felt the weight of that look, a silent plea wrapped in gratitude and fear. Her pulse quickened. She wanted to demand answers, but Lily was watching, so she nodded instead, her tone firmer than she felt. "You're safe here. For now." The last two words slipped out before she could stop them, because a part of her knew safety was temporary, fragile, easily broken. The storm outside howled, shaking the windows, but inside it was another kind of storm. Quieter, sharper, carried in the silence of a man who had secrets heavy enough to follow him into a stranger's home. Hazel realized then that their lives, hers and Lily's, had just shifted into something far larger than a passing storm. The storm outside pounded against the thin windows as Hazel handed Keanu a towel. His clothes clung to him, dripping onto the worn linoleum floor, leaving small puddles that spread beneath his boots. He took the towel carefully, as if even that small kindness meant more to him than it should, and nodded his thanks. "You didn't have to let me in," he said softly, his voice steady but carrying a weight she couldn't quite name. Hazel gave a small shrug, masking her nerves. "Couldn't just leave you out there in this weather. Storm doesn't care who you are." But Lily was less restrained. The little girl peeked around her mother's side, her wide eyes fixed on the man sitting in their tiny apartment. Her voice came out in a breathless whisper. Are you really the movie star? The one from the action movies?" Keanu paused, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. "Yeah," he admitted, his tone warm and unpretentious. "That's me." Lily gasped and darted closer, her excitement momentarily blotting out the sound of the storm. "Mom, it's him! It's really him!" She turned back to Keanu, eyes shining. "You fight bad guys and save the world in the movies." Keanu chuckled, but it wasn't the laugh of a man basking in admiration. It was softer, more reserved, as if he wanted to keep the moment small. "Those are just stories, Lily. Pretend. Off-screen. I'm just a regular guy." Hazel watched the exchange carefully, her arms folded. She had seen plenty of people come through the diner with airs of self-importance, flaunting what little fame or wealth they had, but this man, sitting soaked in her threadbare apartment, didn't seem interested in flashing stardom. Still, there was something in his eyes that unsettled her. It wasn't the nerves of someone embarrassed to be caught in a storm, it was deeper, heavier. The contrast hit Hazel hard. Here was Keanu Reeves, the man she'd seen on giant screens, riding motorcycles through explosions, walking away from impossible battles without flinching, sitting at her tiny kitchen table with its peeling laminate surface. Her apartment was clean but worn, every piece of furniture a hand-me-down or a thrift store find. The faint smell of damp from the storm seeped through the walls, mingling with the leftover scent of fried eggs and coffee from earlier. This was a world far removed from Hollywood mansions and red carpets. And yet he didn't look out of place in arrogance. He looked out of place in fragility. Hazel couldn't ignore it. His smile didn't reach his eyes, and every time the wind howled, his gaze flicked nervously toward the door, as if expecting something far worse than rain to come crashing through. Hazel leaned against the counter, studying him in silence. "Storm's bad," she said finally, choosing her words carefully. "But I don't think that's what's scaring you." Keanu's eyes met hers, and for a fleeting second, his mask slipped. The fear there was raw and undeniable. Hazel set an old kettle on the stove, the familiar hiss of gas catching filling the silence. She tried to focus on the small act, something normal, something grounding. It gave her hands purpose, because her mind was racing with questions she didn't dare ask. Keanu Reeves, sitting at her table, looking more fragile than she had ever imagined, wasn't just passing through like any other customer at Rosie's Diner. Something was wrong, something more than just the rain. Lily climbed onto the chair across from him, her chin resting in her small palms, staring at him as though he were a storybook come to life. So, in the movies, when you fight the bad guys, are you really brave, or do you get scared? Keanu tilted his head, considering her question with surprising seriousness. I think everyone gets scared, Lily. The trick isn't not being scared. It's deciding to keep going even when you are. Hazel glanced over her shoulder at him as she poured hot water into chipped mugs, her eyebrows knitting together. The answer was simple, but it carried weight. It sounded less like advice for a child and more like a reminder to himself. She brought the cups over, sliding one in front of him. "Thank you," he murmured again, his tone so humble it caught her off guard. She had expected the charm of a movie star, the polished ease of someone used to admiration. Instead, his gratitude sounded real, almost too real. Hazel sat down beside Lily, her hand brushing her daughter's hair back. "She'll ask you 100 questions if you let her," she warned lightly, trying to break the tension building in the room. "I don't mind," Keanu replied, offering Lily the faintest smile. "Questions are good. They mean you're curious." Lily grinned at the permission. "Do you have a big house with lots of rooms?" Keanu leaned back in the chair, his expression softening, though a shadow lingered in his eyes. "I have a place, yes. But houses don't feel big when you live in them alone." The words hung in the air, heavier than Hazel expected. Lily, in her innocence, didn't catch the sadness, but Hazel did. She glanced around her cramped apartment, the paint chipped near the window, the lamp that flickered if you touched it wrong, the second-hand couch sagging at the middle. It was nothing compared to his world, yet he sat here as if the walls of her home gave him more comfort than whatever mansion he had just described. The storm rumbled louder outside, and Hazel noticed it again, the way his body stiffened, his eyes flicking toward the sound, his shoulders tightening. This wasn't just a man shaken by bad weather. It was someone who carried a deeper storm within, one that no roof could keep out. Hazel studied him quietly, the unease in her chest growing. Something told her that letting him in tonight had been more than a simple act of kindness. It had tied her and Lily to something far bigger than their little apartment could contain. The storm battered the windows with relentless force, each gust rattling the old glass in its frame. Hazel sat across from Keanu now, her hands wrapped around her mug, more for warmth than the tea inside. She kept sneaking glances at him, studying the man who was supposed to be larger than life. Instead, what she saw sitting in her small kitchen was someone very human, someone weighed down by something far heavier than fame. Lily had settled on the couch, clutching her worn stuffed rabbit, her questions finally giving way to drowsy silence. She leaned against the armrest, eyelids fluttering, though her gaze kept drifting toward Keanu, as if afraid she might miss something important. Hazel envied her daughter's innocence. Children didn't yet know how to read the kind of tension that filled the room. "You're not just here because of the rain, are you?" Hazel's voice was quiet but firm, cutting through the sound of the storm. Keanu looked up slowly, his dark eyes locking with hers. For a moment, he didn't answer. His silence was almost worse than words, carrying with it a weight she could feel pressing against her chest. Hazel leaned forward, setting her cup down with a soft clink. "I don't need the details, but I can see it. You're scared, and it's not because of thunder." He inhaled deeply, his fingers brushing over the rim of his mug. The faint smile he had given Lily earlier was gone now, replaced by a guarded expression. "Fear has a way of following you, even when you think you've outrun it," he murmured, almost to himself. Hazel's heart pounded harder. She wanted to demand answers, to know what kind of danger had walked through her door tonight, but something in his voice stopped her. It wasn't arrogance or the kind of secrecy that came from mistrust. It was the tone of a man who had been carrying a burden alone for too long. She nodded slowly, her jaw tightening. "Well, whatever storm you brought with you, just know, my little girl doesn't deserve to get caught up in it." Keanu's eyes softened at that, and for the first time she saw more than fear in them. She saw regret. "I know," he said quietly, "and I'll do everything I can to make sure she's safe." The sincerity in his tone startled Hazel. Movie stars could act, of course, but this didn't sound like performance. It sounded raw, unpolished, the kind of honesty you didn't fake when the world outside was threatening to tear apart. The lights flickered then, plunging the apartment into near darkness for a heartbeat before buzzing back to life. Hazel's stomach tightened at the thought of losing power completely. The storm outside was already dangerous, but something told her the storm inside her apartment might be worse. She drew in a shaky breath, clutching her cup once more, and whispered almost too softly to hear, "What have I let into my home?" The phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Its harsh vibration rattled against Hazel's chipped coffee table, the sound filling the dimly lit apartment like a wasp trapped in glass. Keanu stared at it with a look Hazel couldn't quite decipher. Fear, anger, and something deeper, something that spoke of exhaustion from running too long. His hands, strong yet trembling, hovered over the device before pulling back, as though touching it might burn him. Hazel exchanged a worried glance with Lily, who was curled up on the couch, clutching her knees. "You should answer," Hazel suggested carefully, trying to steady her voice. "Whoever it is, maybe they can help." "No." Keanu's voice was sharp, almost cutting, before softening into a rasp. "It's not help. It's them." He rose suddenly, the tension in his movements unsettling. With a sudden burst of frustration, he snatched up the phone and hurled it against the wall. It cracked loudly, pieces scattering across the floor. Lily gasped, her small body jerking in fright, while Hazel instinctively stepped in front of her daughter. For a long moment, silence weighed on the room, broken only by the rain pounding outside. Keanu's chest heaved, his eyes fixed on the shattered remains of the phone. Hazel felt her heart pounding in her ears. This wasn't just about a storm anymore. There was something else, something pressing in from all sides. Finally, Keanu spoke, his voice low, carrying a gravity that made Hazel's stomach twist. "People are after me." Hazel swallowed hard. "What do you mean, after you?" His gaze shifted toward the candle on the table, the flickering light reflecting off his damp hair. "I found something I wasn't supposed to find. Files. Proof. Things powerful people would do anything to bury." Hazel's pulse quickened, her mind racing to catch up with his words. "What kind of things?" she asked, though part of her already feared the answer. Keanu drew in a shaky breath. "Clean energy. Real, limitless energy. Technology that could change everything for families like yours. For everyone. But if the truth gets out, those corporations lose trillions, and they'll never let that happen." Hazel felt the words sink into her chest like stones. Clean energy. Limitless power. For a split second, her mind pictured her overdue bills stacked on the counter, the letters stamped "Final Notice" that she had shoved into a drawer. She imagined a world where she didn't have to choose between groceries and electricity, where her daughter's future wasn't chained to scarcity. But that fragile hope collided instantly with dread. If Keanu was telling the truth, then they weren't just hiding from a storm. They were hiding from something much darker. She forced her voice steady, though her hands trembled. You're saying you found a way to fix it all, and now people want to kill you for it? Keanu leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, fingers digging into his hair. His silence spoke louder than words. Finally, he lifted his eyes to hers, raw and desperate. It's not just me they'll come for. Anyone near me is at risk. You and your daughter. Stop, Hazel cut in, her tone sharper than she intended. Don't you dare put this on us. You showed up here in the middle of a storm, soaked to the bone, and I opened my door because I couldn't let a man die out there. I didn't sign up for conspiracies or mercenaries. Her words hung heavy, but even as she said them, a part of her knew she couldn't push him out into the night. Lily peeked up at them with wide eyes, her small voice cutting through the tension. Mom, is he in trouble? Hazel hesitated, looking between her daughter's innocent face and Keanu's haunted expression. She exhaled slowly. Yes, baby. He's in trouble. And now, so are we. Outside, the wind howled against the windows, rattling the glass. The storm felt closer, heavier, as though the sky itself was bearing down on them. Hazel wrapped her arms tightly around Lily, her mind racing with possibilities. This wasn't just bad weather. It was a reckoning she hadn't asked for, but one she could no longer avoid. Hazel's breathing slowed as reality pressed in around her. The man sitting in her tiny living room wasn't just a stranger caught in a storm. He was carrying something that could shake the foundations of the world, and the cost of knowing it, of even brushing against his secret, could be higher than she had ever imagined. Her eyes drifted to the cracked phone on the floor, silent at last. But silence didn't mean safety. Whoever had been on the other end of those calls, whoever wanted Keanu silenced, wouldn't stop just because his phone was broken. They would already be closing in. Hazel could almost feel it, like shadows gathering just beyond the rain-streaked windows. You should leave, she whispered, though her voice betrayed her conflict. You shouldn't be here with us. Keanu shook his head, his expression filled with both gratitude and regret. If I leave now, they'll find me faster, and I can't fight this alone. I thought I could, but... He looked at Lily, then back to Hazel. Sometimes the only thing that keeps a person alive is knowing someone believes them. Hazel's throat tightened. She had spent her life trying to hold her little family together, scraping by shift after shift, teaching her daughter kindness as the one thing they could always afford. And now, in the middle of this nightmare, she realized that same kindness had opened her door to a man hunted for trying to save the world. The storm outside thundered, shaking the walls, as if nature itself echoed her racing heart. Hazel pulled Lily closer and met Keanu's gaze with trembling resolve. Then, we're already in this. But if what you're saying is true, you can't just be running, you need to be ready to fight back. For the first time since stepping into her home, Keanu's eyes softened, a flicker of hope breaking through the fear. Maybe with your help, I can. And Hazel understood then. This storm wasn't just wind and rain. It was the beginning of something far bigger, and her family was now at the center of it. The storm pressed harder against the building, rattling the glass in its frames. For a moment, Hazel thought the walls themselves were trembling. Then the apartment was swallowed by darkness. The hum of the refrigerator died, the flicker of the ceiling light vanished, and only the howling wind remained. Lily let out a small squeal, clutching her stuffed rabbit close. "Mom, the lights!" she cried. Hazel struck a match quickly, lighting the half-burned candle on the table. Its glow cast their faces in soft orange, shadows dancing across the walls. She pulled her daughter into her lap, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart. The power's just out. We're safe here." Across the room, Keanu sat still, his features carved in the faint light. The candle's flame seemed to cling to him, throwing his eyes into sharp relief. Hazel couldn't help but notice the exhaustion etched into his face, Deeper than mere sleepless nights, he looked like a man worn thin by invisible battles. Lily tilted her head, her innocent voice cutting through the silence. "Mr. Reeves, you said you made mistakes. What did you mean?" Hazel stiffened, about to hush her daughter, but Keanu raised his hand gently. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and let out a long breath. "Mistakes," he said softly, the word lingering in the air like smoke. "I've made more than I can count. Trusting people who didn't deserve it, believing the world would let me live quietly, thinking fame could protect me when really it only painted a bigger target on my back." Hazel watched him closely. This was no scripted line, no polished answer from a talk show. These words were heavy with something raw, something true. Lily, ever curious, leaned in. "But you're famous. Doesn't that make life easier?" Keanu let out a hollow laugh, shaking his head. "Sometimes people think fame makes you untouchable, but it doesn't. It just makes your mistakes bigger, louder, harder to escape. And tonight, I'd give anything not to be Keanu Reeves. I'd give anything just to be safe like anyone else." The candle flickered, and Hazel felt the truth of his words settle between them. For the first time, the distance between their worlds, Hollywood and a shabby Austin apartment, seemed to vanish. The quiet of the night in the small apartment was shattered when a distant echo rose from the street below. It wasn't the sound of passing cars or idle chatter. It was sharper, more purposeful. The single mother, clutching her child close, froze in place. Her breath caught. Keanu's head tilted slightly, his expression darkening, as though he recognized a rhythm within the noise that others might dismiss. "Stay here," he whispered firmly, his voice low but carrying a weight that silenced any protest. He moved to the window, careful not to disturb the blinds too much, and peered through the narrow slit. Outside, under the flickering glow of a faulty street lamp, a black SUV had come to a slow, deliberate stop. Its tinted windows reflected nothing, and the engine's hum lingered like a predator's growl. The mother's heart pounded. "Who are they?" she asked, her voice trembling, more to herself than to him. Keanu didn't answer right away. His hand brushed against the wall as if steadying himself, his jaw tightening. "People who don't knock," he finally murmured, his tone suggesting that these visitors weren't the kind one welcomed. The child, sensing the tension, buried his face in his mother's shoulder. She stroked his hair, her own fear masked behind forced calm. Keanu turned back to them, his eyes softened but urgent. "Do you trust me?" The question hung in the air. It was absurd. She had known him less than a day, yet in that moment his presence felt like a shield. Despite the storm outside and the shadows gathering, there was a gravity to him, something unshakable. She nodded slowly. "Yes." Keanu exhaled as if the answer mattered more than she could know. He reached into the pocket of his damp jacket and produced a folded piece of paper, worn and smudged from the rain. He pressed it into her hand. "If something happens to me tonight, you keep this safe. Don't open it unless you have to. Promise me." Her fingers curled around the note, trembling. She wanted to refuse, to shove it back at him, to deny the danger pressing against her walls. But his eyes, steady and haunted, told her there was no choice. From outside came the crunch of boots on wet pavement. Several doors opened at once, and shadows spilled from the SUV. The air thickened with menace. Keanu glanced at the boy, then back at his mother. "No matter what, don't let them inside." And with that he moved toward the door, his body tense yet graceful, every step a silent declaration that he would face what was coming. The single mom's apartment, once a quiet haven of survival, now felt like the front line of a battle she had never asked for. The authorities had already come and gone once, their suspicious eyes sweeping every corner, their clipped voices echoing in her ears. She had stood tall then, protecting Keanu, protecting the truth she didn't yet fully understand. But in the hours that followed, the weight of what she had done pressed down harder and harder. Her son noticed it first. "Mom, are you scared?" he asked, his small voice breaking the silence as he fiddled nervously with the broken handle of his toy truck. She forced a smile and brushed the hair from his forehead. "A little," she admitted softly. "But sometimes being brave means doing the right thing even when you're scared." She didn't realize then how deeply those words would carve themselves into her child's memory. Keanu had been listening from across the room, seated quietly with his long fingers wrapped around a steaming cup of tea she had insisted he drank. His eyes softened at the exchange, and for the first time in days, he spoke at length. He told her about the storm he was caught in, not just the one outside that night, but the storm of corruption, betrayal, and powerful men trying to silence him. He spoke not like a movie star or a man above her world, but like a weary traveler desperate for a place to breathe. The more he shared, the more the mother realized that fate had brought him here for a reason. She wasn't just giving shelter to a stranger, she was part of something larger, something that could ripple far beyond the walls of her apartment. And yet, with every passing hour, the danger grew. She caught shadows lingering too long outside her building. She noticed calls with no one speaking when she answered. That night, she lay awake beside her sleeping son, staring at the ceiling as doubts gnawed at her. Could she really risk everything? Her safety, her child's safety, for a man she barely knew? But when she turned her head and saw her boy curled up peacefully, clutching the blanket Keanu had draped over him earlier, her answer was clear. The next morning, she told Keanu something that surprised even herself. "We're not just hiding you anymore, we're helping you fight back." It wasn't said with bravado. It was said with the quiet conviction of a woman who had endured too much to let fear dictate her choices any longer. And in that moment, Keanu's gratitude was wordless. Just a steady, searching look that told her she had given him something even more valuable than refuge. The apartment was wrapped in the uneasy quiet that followed the storm's first lull. Outside, wind still rattled the loose shutters and rain tapped steadily against the window panes. But inside Hazel's small living room, the silence was too sharp, too heavy, as though the night itself was holding its breath. Hazel clutched Lily close on the worn sofa, trying to keep her daughter calm, though her own heartbeat thundered in her ears. Keanu paced near the window, his shoulders tense, eyes flicking toward the shadows outside. Then it came, a sound that shattered the fragile calm. Heavy footsteps crunched across the gravel outside her door, deliberate, unhurried, each step echoing like a warning. Hazel froze, her breath caught in her chest. The steps grew louder, closer, until they stopped directly outside. For a moment there was nothing, and then the door shook violently under the first pounding knock. "Open up!" a deep voice barked, muffled but sharp with authority. Another fist slammed against the wood, harder this time, the door rattling in its frame. "We know he's in there. Hand him over!" Hazel's stomach dropped. Lily whimpered softly and pressed her face against her mother's chest, clutching her tightly. Hazel smoothed her daughter's hair, whispering for her to stay quiet, but her own voice shook with fear. Keanu moved toward her, his expression calm but urgent. He crouched beside Hazel, his voice low. "Don't open it. They're not who they say they are." Hazel's eyes widened. "They said they're federal agents." He shook his head, his voice firm. "No. If they were, they'd identify themselves. They'd show a badge, announce their presence, follow protocol. Real agents don't bang on doors in the middle of the night and make threats." His gaze hardened, jaw tightening. "These men aren't government. They're mercenaries, and if they get inside, they won't care who gets hurt." The pounding grew louder, more violent, the wood groaning with each hit. Voices shouted over one another outside, ordering Hazel to open up, to surrender the man inside. The sound was relentless, a chorus of menace crashing against the thin barrier of the door. Hazel felt her pulse quicken, fear clawing at her throat. Keanu placed a steadying hand on her arm. "We hold together," he whispered. "No matter what happens. We hold together." The pounding on the door grew fiercer, each blow sending a shudder through the walls of Hazel's tiny apartment. The old wood groaned in protest, splinters shaking loose around the frame. Hazel squeezed her eyes shut for a moment, whispering a silent prayer, while Lily buried her face deeper into her chest, trembling like a leaf. "Hazel," a voice outside barked, louder than before. "This doesn't concern you. Give us the man and no one else has to get hurt." The words struck her like ice. They knew her name. Her skin prickled as though the night itself had turned against her. She clutched Lily tighter, her mind racing with panic. How did they know who she was? How long had they been watching? Keanu's voice cut through the rising terror, low but steady, like an anchor in a storm. "They're trying to break you. Don't listen." Hazel looked at him, searching his face. His eyes were calm but sharp, filled with a knowledge that came from living too long under threats like these. He moved closer to the door, pressing his back against the wall beside it, his ear tilted to listen. His voice dropped to a whisper, meant only for Hazel. "They'll try to scare us into opening before they break it down. Once they're inside, it's chaos. We have to be ready for that." Hazel shook her head, tears burning in her eyes. "I don't have weapons. I don't know how to fight these people." "You don't need to," Keanu said firmly. "Your job is to keep Lily safe. Mine is to make sure they don't take us without a fight." The door rattled again, harder this time, the sound of boots slamming against it echoing through the small space. The thin chain lock rattled loose, a reminder of just how fragile their barrier really was. Hazel could see the doorframe cracking, fine lines spidering outward from the force. Each hit brought them closer to being exposed, to being dragged into the night. "On three!" one of the men shouted outside. Hazel's heart lurched. She clutched Lily tighter, her whole body trembling. Keanu crouched low, his muscles coiled, his eyes fixed on the door, as though calculating every angle, every second they had left. His voice was calm, but urgent. "Stay behind me. Whatever happens, don't let go of her." The door shuddered again, the wood splitting, a jagged crack appearing down the middle. Hazel's breath caught. The storm outside no longer felt like the only danger. The storm had come inside. The count outside thundered through the walls. 1, 2! The men's voices rose in unison, their boots stomping against the porch, as the final warning reverberated through Hazel's fragile home. "On 3! The door jolted violently, the chain snapping free and the hinges groaning under the assault. Hazel gasped and pulled Lily with her toward the corner of the room, shielding her with her body. She could feel her daughter's tears dampening her shirt, Lily's tiny fingers digging into her arms in sheer terror. Hazel's heart pounded so hard she thought it might break her ribs. The door splintered again, this time cracking wide enough for Hazel to see a sliver of the night outside. A gloved hand reached through the gap, groping for the lock. Keanu lunged, slamming his shoulder into the door, forcing it shut again with every ounce of strength in his body. The wood shrieked under the pressure, the frame quivering. He braced himself against it, teeth clenched, sweat running down his temple. "They're not government," Keanu barked over his shoulder, his voice booming in the small space. "If they were, they'd have broken protocol by now. They'd have IDs, warrants, something. These men want me silenced, Hazel, and they don't care who gets in the way." Another crash. The door buckled further, a jagged crack splitting down the middle, shards of wood scattering across the floor. Hazel's chest seized with panic. Her instincts screamed to flee, but there was nowhere to go, no exit but the front door now under siege. The storm outside roared louder, rattling the windows as if the world itself was collapsing around them. Keanu shoved back against the door again, his voice low but steady. "Hazel, listen to me. When this gives way, you grab Lily and stay behind me. Do not try to reason with them. Do not believe a word they say." His eyes flicked toward hers, fierce but reassuring. I've been hunted before. I know their kind. And I won't let them touch you." The pounding fists returned, shaking the apartment like thunder. The wood shrieked one last time, splinters flying across the floor. Hazel clutched her daughter close, every muscle in her body tensed as the door gave its final warning groan. Then, with a deafening crack, it began to break apart. The pounding on the door that had rattled Hazel's bones earlier suddenly gave way to something far worse. The lock gave a screeching cry before the entire frame splintered inward. The door swung violently, crashing against the wall as shadows spilled into the apartment. They weren't police. Hazel knew at the instant she saw them. Black tactical gear, faces masked, movements sharp and efficient. These weren't men who announced warrants or offered explanations. These were soldiers for hire, mercenaries whose only allegiance was to money. Lily screamed and clung to Hazel's waist, her tiny arms like iron around her mother. Hazel's back pressed against the wall, every instinct in her screaming to protect her daughter. She glanced at Keanu. He stood in the center of the room, posture taut, his body a wall between the intruders and the family. His face was set, calm, but charged with a quiet defiance. Then she saw her. A woman stepped through the doorway, untouched by the chaos. She wore no tactical mask, no heavy armor. Just a dark, tailored suit that clung to her frame with calculated sharpness. Her heels clicked against the broken wood, a sound far too deliberate for the storm raging around them. Her hair was slicked back, her face cold and unreadable, but her eyes gleamed with authority. "Mr. Reeves," she said smoothly, as though greeting him in a boardroom, "you've caused quite a mess." Keanu's fists clenched at his sides, but his voice was steady. "Hazel and her daughter have nothing to do with this. Let them go." The woman tilted her head, her lips curling into a smile that was anything but kind. "On the contrary, they've seen too much already. That makes them part of it." Hazel's chest tightened. The weight of those words crushed down on her. She had known, deep inside, that taking this man in would bring danger. But hearing it declared so bluntly, watching armed strangers in her living room, turned her fear into something sharper. Survival. Lily buried her face against Hazel's stomach, whimpering. Hazel bent slightly, her arms tightening around her daughter. Her voice trembled, but she forced the words out. "She's a child. Leave her out of this." The suited woman's eyes never softened. "Collateral doesn't choose its role, Mrs. Thompson. It's chosen for them." The room grew quieter after Keanu's words, but Elena's hands twisted nervously in her lap. Her eyes flickered toward the door as if she were bracing for an escape. He noticed, leaning forward slightly, voice steady but gentle. "You to feel cornered. I don't want you to feel cornered. I just need you to know that I'm here to listen. Not as an actor the world sees, but as the man who once loved you, and who still respects the person you are." Her composure cracked. A shaky laugh escaped her lips, bitter and self-mocking. "Respect? Keanu, I don't even respect myself. I let ambition dictate my choices. I thought I was being practical, choosing stability, a safer future. Instead, I lost everything that mattered. I lost you, and worse, I lost myself." He didn't rush to respond. Silence hung between them, heavy, but not suffocating. It was the kind of silence that gave her permission to continue. Tears slid down her cheeks, and she didn't bother wiping them away. "I grew up watching my father gamble away everything," she whispered. "I swore I'd never repeat his mistakes, that I'd build a life untouched by chaos. But in running from his failures, I created my own. I hurt you. I hurt my son. And now, all that fear I carried has made me into the very thing I swore I wouldn't be. An echo of him." Keanu's chest tightened. The vulnerability in her words cut through him like glass. He had seen Elena strong, proud, unbreakable. To hear her now, small, fractured, admitting her deepest shame, was almost unbearable. He said, "Elena," he said softly, "your father's mistakes don't define you, and neither do yours. What matters is what you do now, in this moment, with the chance in front of you. You still have time to be the mother your son needs, and forgiveness," he paused, steadying his voice, "forgiveness is still possible." Her gaze snapped to his, wide and trembling. "Do you really believe that? After everything? After the years of silence?" He nodded, his voice firm but warm. "I do. Because I've seen it happen. I've lived it. My own father was absent most of my life. For years I carried that weight, that anger. But I learned that forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It gives us the strength to move forward." The words landed between them like a fragile gift. Elena clutched her necklace, as if holding on to something invisible and sacred. Her sobs eased into quiet breaths, her shoulders slowly lowering as if a burden had been lifted, even slightly. Keanu reached across the table, not to take her hand, but to place his palm flat against the wooden surface, close enough for her to see the gesture, but far enough to let her decide. After a long moment, she laid her trembling hand over his. Neither spoke. No apology could undo the years, no words could rewrite the choices that led them here. But in that fragile silence, there was acknowledgement, a beginning, however uncertain. The whispers outside the courtroom grew louder, and the story began spilling into the streets. Reporters snapped photos of Keanu as he left the courthouse, his face calm but unreadable. Many expected him to celebrate, to stand on the courthouse steps and give a triumphant speech about defeating arrogance. Instead, he paused, let the cameras flash, and quietly helped an elderly woman who tripped on the courthouse stairs. That simple act became the photo that circulated around the world. More than the ruling, more than the headlines. It was Keanu's humility that people remembered. Inside the legal world, however, the shockwaves were far from over. Law schools dissected the trial, professors pointing to it as a case study in strategy and restraint. Articles titled, "How Reeves Outsmarted the Courtroom Elites" began to surface. Students whispered about the moment he revealed the hidden precedent, about the way he never raised his voice, even while dismantling the opposing lawyer's argument. The arrogant attorney who once mocked him became a cautionary tale in every lecture hall. But for Keanu, none of that mattered. He never cared for trophies or accolades. His true victory lay in the quiet message his actions carried. Dignity doesn't shout, and truth doesn't need arrogance to win. Still, as he walked through the sea of microphones, a young law student stepped forward. She nervously asked, "Mr. Reeves, what's the secret? How did you stay so composed when they tried to humiliate you?" Keanu paused, looked her in the eyes, and answered with words that silenced the crowd. "When you know who you are, no insult can take that away. The law isn't about pride, it's about justice. Remember that, and you'll never lose yourself." That moment was replayed endlessly, becoming the defining quote of the trial. For days, it lingered on social media, scribbled on posters, and echoed in classrooms. It was no longer just about a courtroom battle. It was about what it meant to hold on to your identity when the world tried to strip it away. And though the trial had ended, its legacy was only beginning. For in the silence after his words, people realized that Keanu Reeves hadn't just won a case. He had changed the way they thought about justice itself. The room felt suffocating, every shadow crawling closer as Hazel clutched Lily tighter in her arms. The suited woman stood at the center, her mercenaries lined like walls of steel behind her, their weapons gleaming in the candlelight. Keanu's chest heaved, his drenched clothes clinging to him, but his eyes never wavered. Hazel could see something building inside him, as though he had reached the point where silence was no longer an option. Slowly, with deliberate care, Keanu reached into the inner pocket of his jacket. The mercenaries raised their rifles instantly, barrels clicking as they aimed. "Easy," the woman commanded with a mocking calm, her hand raised. "Let's not make this bloody. Show me what you're hiding." Keanu pulled out a small object wrapped in waterproof tape, worn from travel and handling. His fingers trembled only slightly as he peeled it back to reveal a slim flash drive. Its metallic glint caught Hazel's eye, so ordinary yet radiating with a gravity that made her chest tighten. He held it up, the mercenaries tracking every movement, the room suddenly charged with electric tension. "This," Keanu said, his voice low but steady, "is why they want me gone. Inside are files proving that corporations have hidden technology capable of generating clean, nearly free energy, engines that could light entire cities, homes, hospitals, without pollution, without cost. They buried it because it threatened their profits, trillions at stake." Hazel blinked, her mind spinning, the words crashing into her like waves. She shook her head, her voice breaking. "You mean to tell me, while I've worked double shifts scrubbing floors, while I've worried about feeding my daughter while people struggle to pay for heat in winter, they've been hiding this?" Keanu's eyes softened with guilt. "Yes. They've silenced scientists, shut down labs, destroyed every trail. I only stumbled across these files by accident, and now they'll do anything to keep them from reaching the world." Hazel's fury ignited, boiling through her fear. She turned toward the woman, her voice trembling but sharp with rage. "You're telling me I've broken my back every day, praying my daughter doesn't go hungry, while you've kept a future that could save lives locked away for money?" The woman's lips curved into a cold smile. She stepped forward, her heels clicking against the broken floorboards. Her eyes gleamed like a predator's as she replied softly, almost sweetly, "Ignorance is safer for you and for her." Hazel's blood boiled as the woman's words cut through the room like ice. Her entire body trembled, not just with fear anymore, but with rage that had nowhere to go. She shifted Lily against her hip, the child's wide eyes darting between the adults, sensing the tension even if she couldn't understand all of it. Hazel's voice shook, but her anger gave it strength. "Safer?" she spat. "Do you have any idea what my life looks like? I've worked every single day until my back gives out. I've skipped meals so my daughter can eat. I've begged landlords for one more week to pay rent. And you're standing here telling me that was all unnecessary? That you're sitting on something that could have saved us, saved everyone?" The woman's expression didn't change. Her cold smirk never faltered. She tilted her head slightly, as if examining a child throwing a tantrum. "You mistake necessity for cruelty, Ms. Thompson. The world runs on order, and order is built on power. If this kind of energy were released, everything would collapse. Economies, governments, systems people depend on. Do you really think chaos is kinder than hunger?" Hazel's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, doubt tried to creep in, but Keanu stepped forward, his voice sharp, cutting through the suffocating fog of manipulation. "Don't listen to her," he said firmly. His eyes locked with Hazel's, steady and unwavering. "I've seen what this technology can do. I've seen the potential it carries. Clean energy, affordable for all, free from the chains of corporations. She wants you to believe suffering is natural, but it isn't. Every empty fridge, every eviction notice, every child shivering in the dark, that's the product of their greed, not necessity." Hazel felt her pulse steady, her fury aligning with his conviction. She turned back to the woman, her jaw set. "You're not protecting the world. You're protecting your profits." The woman's smirk finally faltered, her eyes narrowing. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Say what you want, but remember this. You're a witness now, and witnesses rarely live long in stories like these." Hazel's arms tightened protectively around Lily. The threat hung in the air, sharp and poisonous, but Hazel refused to look away. For the first time, she felt something stronger than fear: defiance. The room seemed to shrink as the woman's threat lingered, pressing against Hazel's chest like a physical weight. Every instinct screamed at her to bow her head, to stay silent, to do whatever it took to keep Lily safe. But the thought of her daughter's future, of millions of children growing up in a world shackled by greed and lies, gave Hazel strength she didn't know she had. Her voice broke the silence, low but unyielding. "I won't let you scare me. Not anymore. My daughter deserves a world where she doesn't have to watch me suffer just to survive. If you think I'll stay quiet about what you've done, you're wrong." Keanu's eyes softened with something close to pride. He shifted slightly, putting himself between Hazel and the mercenaries, his stance protective but calm. He raised the flash drive again, holding it as if it were both a weapon and a promise. "You can threaten us, but the truth won't stay buried forever. Too many people have suffered already. You can silence me, but you can't silence an idea. Once it's out, it spreads. That's what terrifies you." The woman's mask of composure cracked for a heartbeat, her jaw tightening. She signaled to one of the mercenaries, who stepped forward with his rifle raised, the metallic click echoing through the tiny apartment like a death knell. Hazel's breath hitched, clutching Lily tighter, her daughter's tears wetting her shirt. But Keanu didn't flinch. His voice was steady, a calm defiance cutting through the tension. "You can point 100 guns at me, but you'll never stop what's coming. People will learn the truth. They always do." The woman's eyes narrowed into slits, her voice dripping with venom. "We'll see about that." Hazel felt Lily's tiny hand grip hers tighter, and in that moment she knew. This wasn't just Keanu's fight. It was hers too. For Lily. For every mother and child scraping by, while the powerful played gods with the future. The storm outside roared again, as if echoing her determination. Whatever happened next, Hazel had made her choice. She would not go quietly. The moment hung like a knife's edge, mercenaries closing in, rifles raised, the woman's cold smile fixed on Hazel and Keanu. Hazel's pulse roared in her ears, Lily trembling against her chest, the air heavy with inevitability. Then, without warning, the night split open. A thunderous crash erupted at the front door, this time not from mercenaries but from a new force. The door blew inward, splintering under a battering ram, and men in tactical gear stormed through, shouting commands. "Federal Bureau of Investigation! Drop your weapons!" The room exploded into chaos. Gunfire erupted, sharp and deafening in the cramped space. Mercenaries dove for cover, answering back with wild bursts of bullets. The suited woman cursed, ducking behind Hazel's overturned table, barking orders to her men. Muzzle flashes lit the room in violent bursts, casting grotesque shadows across the walls. Hazel hit the floor instinctively, pulling Lily down with her, shielding her small body from the storm of violence. Her heart thundered as wood splintered, glass shattered, and smoke filled the air. She risked a glance upward, catching sight of a woman in FBI gear, her dark hair pulled back tightly, her eyes scanning with sharp focus. The agents around her moved with precision, pushing the mercenaries back. Amid the chaos, Keanu dropped beside Hazel, his hand gripping her arm. His face was close, his voice barely audible over the cacophony. "Hazel, listen to me. Take this." He shoved the flash drive into her palm, curling her fingers around it with surprising force. "Hide it. No matter what happens, don't lose it." Hazel's eyes widened, panic and disbelief colliding in her chest. "But—" "No time," he cut in, his gaze fierce. "They'll search me first. But you, they won't expect you. Keep it safe." Another burst of gunfire rattled the walls, sending debris raining down. Hazel clutched the drive tightly, the tiny object burning against her skin like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Keanu rose halfway, scanning the chaos, then gestured toward the back of the apartment. "The fire escape. We have to move now." Hazel's throat tightened as she held Lily close, but she nodded. There was no other choice. Survival meant running, and running meant holding onto the one thing that could change everything. The air was thick with smoke and gunpowder as Hazel stumbled to her feet, clutching Lily against her chest with one arm and the flash drive pressed into her palm with the other. The apartment was chaos incarnate. Mercenaries shouting, FBI agents barking orders, flashes of gunfire turning the room into a strobe of terror. Every sound rattled Hazel's bones. Keanu leaned close, his face grim and urgent. "Stay low. Follow me." They crouched together, weaving past overturned chairs and shattered glass, edging toward the small back hallway that led to the fire escape. An FBI agent spotted them and shouted, "This way," before firing a burst that drove the mercenaries back. But the suited woman was nowhere to be seen. Her absence made Hazel's skin crawl. The hallway was darker, narrow and suffocating. Rain seeped in through a cracked window, mixing with the dust and smoke. Hazel's foot slipped on the wet floor, and she nearly went down, but Keanu steadied her quickly, his hand gripping her elbow. "Keep moving," he urged. Another blast shook the apartment behind them. Lily cried out softly, her voice muffled against Hazel's shoulder. Hazel whispered into her daughter's ear, "Almost there, baby. Just hold on." They reached the fire escape door. Keanu threw his weight against it, and the rusted metal screeched open. A wall of storm wind and rain slammed into them, soaking their clothes instantly. The night outside was no safer. Thunder cracked, and the city below was half submerged in floodwater, streetlights flickering through the downpour. Hazel hesitated, clutching Lily tightly as she stared down the slick iron steps that descended into the roaring storm. It looked impossible. But Keanu turned to her, his expression fierce but reassuring. "We don't have a choice. If we stay, they'll pin us here. If we go, we have a chance." Hazel drew a shaky breath, then nodded. Together they stepped onto the fire escape, the metal groaning under their weight. Cold rain lashed against their faces, the storm's fury trying to shove them back inside. Hazel held Lily close, her arms aching, but her determination stronger than fear. They began their descent, each step into the storm feeling like a plunge into another battle. The fire escape rattled beneath their weight as rain battered down, soaking their skin and blurring their vision. Hazel clung to the railing with one hand, Lily in the other, her knuckles white against the slick metal. Each step felt treacherous, every gust of wind threatening to rip them away and cast them into the flooded alley below. Keanu moved first, guiding them down with sharp, urgent glances over his shoulder. He shielded them from the worst of the storm, his body angled to take the brunt of the wind. "Keep going," he called back, his voice nearly lost in the thunder. "We're almost to the ground." When they finally reached the bottom, the alley greeted them with knee-deep water rushing like a river. Hazel gasped as the cold slammed against her legs, nearly knocking her off balance. She hoisted Lily higher, whispering encouragement to keep the child calm. "Hold on to me, baby. Don't let go." Keanu scanned both ends of the alley. Red and blue flashes from FBI vehicles pulsed faintly at the far end, but so did the dark outlines of black SUVs. Mercenaries still prowling, still hunting. "This way," he said, pointing toward the narrower street that cut behind the diner Hazel knew so well. They waded into the torrent, the water pulling at their legs like hands trying to drag them under. Every step was a battle. Hazel's breath came in ragged bursts, her muscles screaming with the effort of carrying Lily while fighting the current. Keanu stayed close, his hand steadying Hazel whenever she faltered. Behind them, shouts pierced the storm, mercenaries spilling out into the alley, their voices sharp, growing closer. Gunfire cracked through the night, bullets splashing into the water just feet from them. Hazel's heart lurched into her throat. She tightened her grip on Lily, pushing herself forward with everything she had left. "Don't stop," Keanu shouted over the storm. "We have to lose them in the streets." Hazel's lungs burned, but her resolve hardened. She had survived long shifts, sleepless nights, and endless struggles. She would survive this, too. Because she had no choice. For Lily. For tomorrow. Together they plunged deeper into the flooded street, the city swallowed by storm and chaos, their desperate flight only beginning. Hazel's legs ached as she splashed through the flooded streets, guiding Keanu and Lily through alleys she knew better than most. Her mind raced with panic and exhaustion, but one thought shone clear in the storm. Rosie's Diner. It wasn't just her workplace, it was familiar, predictable, and full of hiding places. If anywhere could buy them time, it was there. The neon sign was dark, its familiar glow extinguished by the power outage. The front windows reflected nothing but streaks of rain. Hazel fumbled with the keys she always carried in her apron pocket, her fingers shaking as thunder rolled overhead. Keanu stayed alert, his eyes scanning the street behind them for the black SUVs that prowled like wolves. Lily clung to Hazel's neck, shivering but silent, too drained to cry. The lock clicked, and Hazel pushed the heavy glass door open. The smell of old grease, coffee, and disinfectant wrapped around her like an odd kind of comfort. She ushered Keanu inside quickly, shutting the door behind them. The storm's howl dulled, replaced by the softer drip of rainwater slipping from their clothes onto the tiled floor. "In here," Hazel whispered, leading them past the darkened booths into the kitchen. She moved by memory, her hand guiding them past counters, fryers, and the industrial refrigerator. The narrow back room offered a little more safety, shielded from the street and harder to spot from outside. They collapsed into a corner, breathless. Hazel sank against the wall, clutching Lily in her lap, her arms trembling from fatigue. Keanu crouched across from them, his face pale and damp, his chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. For a moment they said nothing, the only sounds their breathing and the distant roar of rain. Then Lily stirred. She squirmed in Hazel's arms and whispered softly, "Mommy, I picked it up." Hazel frowned, confused. Lily's small hand uncurled, revealing the tiny flash drive nestled safely in her palm. Hazel's eyes widened. "Lily," she gasped, her voice breaking. When did you?" When he dropped it," Lily said proudly, her eyes shining in the dim light. "I didn't want them to take it." Hazel stared at her daughter, overwhelmed by the child's quiet bravery. Keanu's gaze softened, a rare flicker of hope breaking through his exhaustion. The smallest act, from the smallest hands, had saved everything. Hazel cupped Lily's small hand around the flash drive, tears pricking her eyes despite the storm still raging in her chest. "You're braver than I ever knew, sweetheart," she whispered, kissing her daughter's damp hair. For a heartbeat, hope pulsed in the tiny room, fragile but real. Keanu leaned forward, his voice hushed but urgent. "This changes everything. They'll come after us harder now because they know we still have it. But Lily, she saved the fight." His gaze lingered on Hazel, gratitude flickering beneath the exhaustion in his eyes. Hazel nodded, though fear pressed against her ribs. "Then we protect it. Whatever it takes." They sat in silence, catching their breath. The diner's kitchen felt oddly safe, the stainless steel counters and humming refrigerators like old companions to Hazel. She had spent years scrubbing these floors, pouring coffee in this place until her feet blistered, never imagining it could become their sanctuary against men with guns and secrets. But the illusion didn't last. The quiet hum was broken by a low sound outside, the unmistakable growl of engines. Hazel froze, her breath caught in her throat. Keanu stiffened, moving silently toward the back door to peer through a narrow crack in the blinds. Outside, through sheets of rain, the black SUVs rolled into the parking lot, their headlights slicing through the storm. Their movements were too precise, too intentional. They weren't searching. They knew. Hazel's heart dropped. "They tracked us," she whispered, clutching Lily tighter. The flash drive suddenly felt heavier, as though it carried the weight of the world in her child's tiny palm. Keanu turned back, his jaw tight, eyes sharp with urgency. "We don't have long. They'll sweep the place. Every room, every corner. If we stay here, we're trapped." Hazel swallowed hard, her mind racing. She knew this building better than anyone, every hallway, every back room, every shortcut. For the first time, that knowledge might save their lives. The sound of doors slamming shut echoed through the storm, followed by the crunch of boots splashing through water. The mercenaries were here. Hazel pressed Lily close and whispered fiercely, "Stay quiet, no matter what." Her voice didn't shake anymore. The diner was no longer her workplace. It was about to become their battlefield. The diner's familiar walls felt foreign now, warped by the echo of approaching boots. Hazel's pulse hammered as she scanned the room, her eyes catching on every detail she'd memorized from years of closing shifts. The walk-in freezer, the crawl space above the pantry, the service hallway leading out to the alley. She knew this place better than anyone, and that knowledge was the only edge they had. Keanu crouched low, his voice urgent but calm. "Where can we hide? Somewhere they won't think to look right away." Hazel's eyes darted to the pantry. "This way." She guided him quickly across the kitchen, keeping Lily pressed close against her chest. Each step was careful, her ears straining to catch every sound. The creak of the diner's front door forced open, the mercenaries' voices cutting through the storm, low and commanding. They slipped into the pantry, the smell of flour and sugar mixing with the damp air clinging to their clothes. Hazel reached up, tugging down the lightweight ceiling panel. "There's space above. I used to hide old supplies there when the owner didn't want to throw them out." Keanu boosted Lily up first, her small body disappearing into the crawl space. Hazel climbed next, her muscles screaming from exhaustion, before Keanu hoisted himself up silently. Together, they pulled the panel back into place, the darkness swallowing them whole. Hazel pressed Lily against her, trying to calm her trembling body. The air was close, dusty, every breath shallow. Below, the sound of heavy boots spread across the diner, mercenaries sweeping through the booths and kitchen, their flashlights slicing through the dark. "Clear the front, check the back," one of them barked. The voices drew closer, reverberating up through the pantry walls. Hazel squeezed her eyes shut, praying they wouldn't hear Lily's shaky breaths. Keanu's hand brushed hers in the dark, steady and grounding. He leaned close, whispering so faintly she barely heard it. "We'll get through this. Trust me." The words weren't a promise. They were a lifeline. Hazel clung to them as the mercenaries moved below, the hunters circling closer, unaware that their prey was right above their heads. Hazel waited in the crawl space until the mercenaries' voices faded, her muscles burning from staying still. She counted slow breaths, praying they'd leave, but she knew better. They wouldn't stop. Not until the flash drive was in their hands. When the silence stretched just long enough, she tapped Keanu's arm and whispered, "We move now." Carefully, they lowered Lily down first. Hazel followed, landing lightly despite her exhaustion. Then Keanu dropped beside her with quiet precision. Hazel's mind raced through the diner's layout. There was a narrow maintenance hallway behind the freezer, a shortcut she had used countless times to take out trash when storms knocked power out. Few people even knew it existed. She led them there, her steps practiced and sure despite the dark. The hallway was narrow, damp, and smelled of mildew, but Hazel moved quickly. Behind them, faint shouts echoed. The mercenaries had split up, sweeping the building and spilling into the surrounding streets. Time was short. Lily clutched Hazel's hand tightly, her small feet splashing softly in puddles as they crept along. Her voice, though hushed, carried a surprising steadiness. "Mom, it's like an adventure story, like the ones you read me before bed." Hazel's heart tightened. "Something like that. she whispered, brushing a strand of wet hair from her daughter's face. She wanted to tell her this wasn't a game, that the danger was real, but she couldn't bear to crush the bravery keeping her child calm. Keanu glanced down at Lily, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then, quietly, he said, "You're braver than most adults I've met. Real heroes? They're not the ones on screens or magazines. Real heroes are people like you and your mom. People who don't give up, even when it's hard." Hazel felt her chest tighten again, this time with something unexpected. For the first time since he appeared at her door, she didn't see Keanu Reeves, the movie star. She saw a man weighed down by the truth he carried, by the danger that followed him, yet still finding strength in her daughter's courage. And in that realization, Hazel's fear shifted. She wasn't just protecting her child anymore. She was part of something larger, something worth every risk. The maintenance hallway spat them out into a back lot behind the diner, its cracked pavement now half flooded, reflecting faint glimmers of streetlight swallowed by the storm. Hazel crouched low, motioning for Keanu to follow her across the lot. The wind whipped through the alley, carrying distant shouts. The mercenaries were expanding their search, their boots striking against the soaked pavement somewhere nearby. Hazel guided them toward a cluster of narrow alleys she'd walked hundreds of times after late-night shifts. The city had a rhythm, and she knew its hidden arteries, the service passages behind laundromats, the locked gates that never quite latched, the stairwells where lights had burned out long ago. To strangers it was a maze. To Hazel, it was survival. They moved quickly, ducking through a chain-link gate Hazel pried open with steady hands. Each turn pressed them deeper into the dark, further from the familiar glow of main streets. The shadows felt alive, pressing in on them, but Hazel kept her focus sharp. She whispered to Keanu, "They'll check every business, every open street, but not here. Nobody bothers with these paths." Keanu nodded, his eyes scanning the rooftops as if expecting danger from above. "You've done this before." Hazel almost laughed, though it came out bitter. "Not this exactly, but when you're cleaning offices at midnight, you learn shortcuts. You learn how to stay unseen." Lily squeezed Hazel's hand and whispered, "Like secret passages in a castle." Hazel smiled faintly at her daughter's words, even as her chest clenched with fear. "Yes, baby, just like that." Behind them, the low rumble of SUV engines reverberated through the storm. Mercenaries were moving block by block, sweeping through buildings with brutal efficiency. Hazel knew they didn't have much time. The city she'd always thought of as weary but safe now felt like a trap closing in. Keanu's voice was quiet, but Hazel heard the weight beneath it. "You've kept us alive because you know this place, not me, not the FBI. You." Hazel met his gaze briefly in the dark. For once, she didn't feel small or invisible or unimportant. She felt necessary, and that realization steadied her trembling hands as they pressed forward into the night. The alleys grew tighter as Hazel guided them deeper into the city's underbelly. Brick walls leaned inward, slick with rain, and trash cans floated in the rising flood. Hazel's shoes squelched with every step, but she pressed forward, her grip on Lily never faltering. Every corner they turned felt like borrowed time. From behind came the unmistakable thud of boots striking water, closer now. Shouts echoed, bouncing off the walls. The mercenaries were sweeping faster, relentless in their pursuit. Hazel's stomach twisted, but she pushed the fear down. Panic would only slow them. She had lived her whole life carrying burdens. Tonight it was simply heavier. Lily tilted her head up from Hazel's shoulder and whispered, "Mom, it's still like an adventure story. We're the heroes. Heroes always keep going." Hazel kissed her daughter's damp forehead, her heart aching at the innocence. "That's right, baby. We keep going." Keanu slowed for a moment, glancing back into the darkness. The storm carved deep shadows across his face, but his voice was steady when he said, "She's right, Hazel. You both are heroes. I've spent years pretending to be one in front of cameras, but that's nothing compared to this. Real heroes are people like you two. People who choose to keep fighting when it would be easier to give up." Hazel met his eyes, the sincerity in them cutting through the chaos. For the first time, she saw past the fame, past the aura of a man worshipped on screens. She saw someone scarred, someone tired, someone who carried too many ghosts on his shoulders. Not a star, but a man. Frightened, burdened, yet standing beside her in the storm. Her throat tightened. "We don't have a choice. We survive, or we don't. That's all there is." Keanu gave a faint, almost broken smile. "That's what makes you strong. Stronger than you know." The sounds of pursuit swelled again, snapping the moment short. Hazel steeled herself, pulling Lily closer. They weren't safe yet, but as they moved into the maze of darkness, she realized something had shifted. She wasn't just running anymore. She was leading, and she would not let them fall. The rain had followed them all the way to the airport. By the time Hazel guided Keanu and Alina past the perimeter road, the storm had turned the tarmac into a mirror of running water and flashing lights. The terminal loomed in the distance like a fortress, glass walls lit with the steady pulse of corporate security patrols. Hazel moved with purpose, leading them through a service gate where the guard post was abandoned, her hood drawn tight against the downpour. She didn't say much, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed the weight she carried. Keanu kept scanning the perimeter, aware of every passing headlight, every shadow that moved just a little too quickly. Elena walked between them, shivering despite her jacket, her face pale but her steps determined. Hazel finally stopped near a small utility building at the far edge of the airport grounds. Its door was marked "Staff Only," the paint faded and the lock scratched with age. She knocked 3 times, then paused, then once more. A moment later, the door creaked open, revealing a man with tired eyes and a heavy frame. His uniform shirt bore the insignia of airport security, though it looked like it had seen better days. "Hazel," he muttered, his voice low. "You should not be here." "Carlos," Hazel said, her voice steady though her breathing was ragged. "We need your help. It's life or death." Carlos's gaze swept past her to Keanu and Elena. His eyes narrowed, suspicion mixing with worry. "Who are they? What trouble are you dragging through my door?" Keanu stepped forward, keeping his tone calm but urgent. "We don't have time for a long explanation. People are after us. Dangerous people. Hazel trusts you, and right now that's the only reason we're here." Carlos hesitated, his hand still on the edge of the door. His expression was guarded, his loyalty torn between an old friend and the risk of betraying his post. Hazel reached for his arm, gripping it firmly. "Carlos, please. You know me. You know I wouldn't come here unless I had no other choice." Her voice broke slightly on the last word, and in that fracture, Carlos saw the truth. Carlos finally stepped back, pulling the door wide enough to let them in. The small security office smelled of burnt coffee and damp raincoats hung on hooks. A dim lamp buzzed in the corner, casting more shadows than light. Hazel guided Keanu and Elena inside quickly, closing the door against the storm. Carlos paced once, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Hazel, I could lose my job. Hell, I could lose more than that if anyone finds out I let you in. You know what's happening out there? Black SUVs everywhere, shutting down entrances. They're not TSA, they're not FBI, they're something else. And they're asking questions." Hazel met his eyes, her voice trembling but clear. "I know, Carlos. That's why I came to you. You're the only one I can trust. They want him." She motioned to Keanu. "And whatever he's carrying, if they get it, if they win, everything changes, and not for the better." Carlos looked at Keanu again, and this time there was recognition in his eyes. He shook his head with a disbelieving half-laugh. "You're telling me Hollywood's golden man is mixed up in this mess?" Keanu's expression stayed somber. "I didn't choose it, but now it's my responsibility. And if we don't get out of here tonight, they'll make sure the truth dies with us." Silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, before Carlos finally exhaled. "Damn it, Hazel, you always did know how to pull me into trouble." A flicker of relief crossed Hazel's face. She squeezed his arm. "Does that mean you'll help us?" Carlos nodded reluctantly. "There are service tunnels beneath the airport. Old routes, mostly forgotten, but some still connect to maintenance areas near the runways. I can get you part of the way through, but..." He paused, his face darkening. "They're locking down the grounds. SUVs are already stationed at key exits. If they're sealing the perimeter, we'll have one shot, and it won't be clean." Hazel's stomach sank, but she forced herself to nod. "One shot is enough. Just tell us where." Carlos motioned for them to follow, already pulling a ring of keys from his belt. "Then stay close, and pray no one's watching." Carlos led them out of the security office and into a dim corridor that smelled faintly of disinfectant and machine oil. His keyring jingled softly as he unlocked a heavy door at the end of the hall. Beyond it stretched a concrete stairwell descending into the bowels of the airport. Hazel carried Lily carefully, her arms aching but steady, while Keanu followed close behind, his eyes scanning every shadow. The stairwell opened into a long service tunnel, its walls lined with old pipes and rusted valves. The flicker of fluorescent lights overhead gave it a ghostly feel, as if the airport's forgotten past was holding its breath. Carlos moved quickly, guiding them down narrow turns, pointing out side doors that led to maintenance rooms and storage areas. But as they neared the end of the passage, the sound of engines rumbled overhead, muffled but unmistakable. Hazel froze, listening. Carlos swore under his breath. "They're tightening the net. SUVs at every gate. If we try the service exits, we'll walk straight into them." Hazel's heart pounded. "Then where?" Carlos hesitated, his jaw tight. Finally he muttered, "There's one more way. An old maintenance tunnel from the war days. It runs beneath the runway, connects to the far side of the field. But it's been sealed for decades, and when it rains like this..." His eyes flicked toward Lily. "It floods." Keanu stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "Is it passable?" Carlos grimaced. "Waist-deep water, maybe worse. Dark, unstable. I wouldn't send anyone through it unless there was no other choice." Hazel shifted Lily in her arms, feeling the child's steady heartbeat against her chest. Her voice was steady, even as fear clawed at her throat. "Then that's our way. We don't have another choice." Carlos studied her face, then Keanu's, then the little girl clinging silently to her mother. At last he nodded. "All right, but you move fast, and you don't stop for anything." He turned sharply, leading them toward another set of stairs that vanished into deeper darkness. The air grew colder with every step, carrying the damp smell of standing water. The storm outside had forced their hand. Now their survival depended on a tunnel built for a war long past. The tunnel yawned before them like the throat of some forgotten beast, its mouth slick with moss, its air heavy with the scent of mildew and standing water. Hazel clutched Lily tighter against her chest as Carlos heaved open the rusted hatch, the sound grinding through the damp air. A rush of cold swept over them, the kind of chill that seemed to seep straight through clothes and into bone. Keanu crouched to peer inside, his flashlight cutting a pale path across the stone walls. The beam caught on rippling water that stretched endlessly forward, its surface disturbed only by the faint drip of condensation falling from the ceiling. The water was waist-deep at least, black and unforgiving. Hazel's stomach turned at the sight, but she forced herself to breathe steadily. Carlos's voice was grim. "Once you're in, I can't follow. If they catch me, maybe I can buy you time by leading them the wrong way. But you'll be on your own." Hazel's hand reached for his briefly, gratitude mingling with fear. "Thank you, Carlos, for everything." He gave her a sad smile, then looked to Keanu. "Protect them, no matter what." Keanu nodded without hesitation. "I will." And then they were stepping down into the black water, the cold hitting like a physical blow. Hazel gasped, clutching Lily as the chill bit into her legs. The little girl buried her face in her mother's shoulder, trembling but silent. Keanu moved ahead, flashlight steady in one hand, the other brushing the slick wall for balance. The tunnel swallowed sound save for the splash of their steps and the occasional hollow echo. The deeper they went, the less real the world outside seemed, as if they had slipped into another realm entirely, a place where time was measured only by each labored breath. Hazel felt the weight of the storm still raging above, pressing down like an unseen hand. Yet in the suffocating darkness there was no thunder, no wind, just them and the endless water stretching forward. Hazel forced herself to keep moving. Each step was a vow, one foot in front of the other, because stopping wasn't an option. Not here. Not now. The cold gnawed at Hazel's legs until she could barely feel them. Her arms shook with the effort of holding Lily above the water, but she refused to let go. Keanu noticed her falter, and without a word he moved closer. "Let me take her," he said softly. Hazel hesitated, instinct screaming to keep her daughter close, but the exhaustion in her muscles betrayed her. Reluctantly, she passed Lily into his arms. Keanu cradled the child with surprising gentleness, his flashlight beam swaying across the tunnel walls as he pressed forward. Lily peeked up at him, whispering, "You're really strong." He smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Strong doesn't always feel like strong, kiddo." Hazel trudged beside him, her breathing ragged. The silence pressed in again, broken only by splashes and the echo of droplets falling from above. Then Keanu's voice came, quieter than the darkness. "You know, I've always thought of myself as a man who lost too many people." Hazel turned her head, surprised by the rawness in his tone. His face was shadowed, but she caught the strain in his expression. "What do you mean?" He shifted Lily carefully on his shoulder, his voice low. "Family, friends, people I cared about. They slip away, one after another. Fame doesn't stop that. Success doesn't heal it. It just makes the losses louder." Hazel slowed, her heart tightening at his words. She had never imagined that beneath the image of the star so many adored lived a man carrying scars that never healed. "You're wrong about one thing," she said firmly, even though her teeth chattered from the cold. "Tonight, you're not the man who lost too many people. Tonight, you're the man saving us." Her words hung in the tunnel, weighty and undeniable. For a moment, Keanu's steps faltered. His grip on Lily tightened, and when he looked at Hazel, there was something almost broken in his gaze, like someone who had been waiting years to hear that kind of faith spoken out loud. He nodded once, swallowing hard. "Then I'll see it through, no matter what." The water crept higher as they pressed deeper into the tunnel, rising from their waists to nearly brushing Hazel's ribs. Each step was a battle against the current, their soaked clothes dragging at their bodies like anchors. The beam of Keanu's flashlight trembled, catching the sheen of water running along the curved stone ceiling. Hazel forced herself not to imagine the tunnel filling entirely, not to picture being swallowed in the dark. Lily whimpered softly, her small hands gripping Keanu's shoulder. He shifted her gently back into Hazel's arms when her strength returned, the exchange practiced now, wordless. They worked together like two halves of one desperate will, passing the child carefully, each determined not to falter. "Almost there," Keanu muttered, though the end of the tunnel was still hidden in blackness. His voice wasn't just for Hazel. It was for himself, too. Hazel pressed on, her calves burning, her teeth chattering so violently she thought they might crack. Then, at last, the dark began to shift. A faint glow, barely perceptible, appeared ahead. She blinked against tears of relief. "Keanu! Look!" He raised the flashlight, but it wasn't the beam that gave them hope. It was the fragile band of pale light seeping in from the tunnel's end. It was dawn, cutting through the storm's tail with the promise of survival. Hazel felt her chest tighten, not just with relief but with something deeper. For hours they had been buried in fear and water and silence, but now, here, with the light ahead, it felt like they had endured something that bound them together. She looked at Keanu, and for the first time since meeting him, she didn't see the movie star the world adored. She saw a man who had chosen to fight through the dark for her and her child. Keanu caught her gaze, and though his face was pale, his eyes carried a strength she hadn't seen before. "We made it," he whispered. Hazel hugged Lily close, her voice fierce, though her body trembled. "No, Keanu, we're making it, and we'll keep making it until it's over." Step by step, guided by the fragile thread of dawn, they pressed toward the light. The tunnel's exit gave way to a desolate field of rust and shadows. Hazel blinked against the sudden brightness of dawn breaking through torn clouds. Before them stretched the airplane graveyard, rows upon rows of hulking abandoned aircraft, their skeletal frames jutting up like monuments to a forgotten war. The storm's rain had soaked everything, puddles shimmering in the new light, steam rising from metal wings. Hazel clutched Lily close, her legs trembling from exhaustion but refusing to buckle. Keanu steadied her with one hand, his face pale but resolute. For a moment, the eerie silence of the graveyard gave them hope. They had made it through the tunnel, through the storm. Maybe they had escaped. Then the engines roared. From behind the rows of rusting aircraft, black SUVs surged forward, tires crunching over gravel, headlights cutting through the mist. Armed men in tactical black spilled out, their boots pounding against the earth. They moved quickly, surrounding Hazel, Keanu, and Lily in a tightening circle. Hazel's heart leapt into her throat. She pulled Lily against her chest, shielding her with her own body, every instinct screaming to fight even though she had no weapon. The cold, suited woman from before stepped forward, her heels clicking against the wet ground. She looked untouched by the storm, her hair perfectly slicked back, her expression one of icy triumph. "End of the line," she said flatly. Her eyes flicked to Keanu, then Hazel. "Hand over the drive, and maybe I'll let the girl live." Keanu's jaw clenched, his fists curling at his sides. He moved slightly in front of Hazel, his broad frame shielding both her and Lily. "You'll never have it," he growled. His voice, though quiet, carried the weight of iron. The woman's lips curved into a cold smirk. "Then you'll die for nothing." The circle of mercenaries raised their rifles, the sound of bolts snapping into place echoing like a final drumbeat. Hazel felt her knees weaken. This was it. After everything, the diner, the storm, the tunnel, they were trapped again, with no way out. And then, from above, came the sound that changed everything. The heavy thrum of rotor blades cut through the morning air. Helicopters. The roar of helicopters shattered the graveyard's stillness. Hazel looked up, shielding her eyes, as 3 massive FBI choppers descended from the clouds, their spotlights flooding the rusted aircraft below with harsh white beams. The mercenaries staggered, some raising their rifles skyward, others backing away as the downdraft whipped rain and debris into the air. "Hold your fire!" a commanding voice barked through a loudspeaker. A figure leaned out from the lead helicopter, her windbreaker marked with bold FBI lettering. The woman's presence radiated authority, her voice sharp and unwavering. "This is Agent Sarah Martinez of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Drop your weapons and stand down immediately." The suited woman's smirk faltered. For the first time, a crack appeared in her icy mask. She barked an order, but before her men could react, ropes dropped from the helicopters. Armed FBI agents rappelled down, boots hitting the ground with practiced precision. Within seconds, the mercenaries were outnumbered, their circle broken apart by the sudden surge of federal muscle. Chaos erupted. Gunfire cracked through the air, echoing against the hollow fuselages of abandoned planes. Hazel pulled Lily to the ground, covering her ears as the world around them dissolved into violence. Keanu crouched low, one arm braced protectively over them, the other reaching to steady Hazel's trembling shoulders. "Oh!" Through the storm of shouting and gunfire, Agent Martinez strode forward, her weapon drawn but her gaze locked on Hazel and Keanu. "You weren't running from us," she shouted over the chaos. "You were running with us. We've been tracking these mercenaries for months." Hazel's breath caught, her mind spinning. All this time she had believed they were alone, hunted, desperate. But now, for the first time, she felt the tide turn. The fight wasn't just theirs anymore. The suited woman snarled, firing a desperate shot before being tackled by two FBI agents. Her cold eyes found Hazel even as she was pinned to the ground, lips curling in one last hiss. "Ignorance would have saved you." Hazel held Lily tighter, her voice steady despite the storm. "No. The truth will..." The gunfire faded into the distance, replaced by the sharp clink of handcuffs and the bark of orders. Hazel slowly lifted her head, the chaos thinning into something that almost resembled calm. Around them, the mercenaries were forced to their knees, weapons stripped from their hands. The suited woman was dragged toward one of the helicopters, her cold eyes never leaving Hazel until the doors slammed shut behind her. Hazel helped Lily stand, brushing damp hair from her daughter's face. The little girl's lips quivered, but her eyes were steady. Keanu rose beside them, his chest heaving, exhaustion painted across every line of his face. He swayed slightly before steadying himself, and Hazel instinctively reached out, her hand resting lightly against his arm. Agent Martinez approached, lowering her weapon, her expression softening as she looked at Hazel and Lily. "You two are braver than most of the agents I've trained," she said firmly. "You didn't just survive, you helped us bring down one of the most dangerous corporate networks in the country." Hazel blinked, overwhelmed. She had never been called brave before. She was just a mother, doing what she had to for her daughter. Yet hearing those words, something inside her shifted. Lily tugged at Hazel's sleeve, then looked up at the agent. "My mom's the bravest person I know." Martinez smiled, nodding in agreement. "She's right." Keanu finally spoke, his voice low but carrying the weight of everything they had endured. He looked at Hazel, his eyes tired yet filled with gratitude. "Your kindness saved me, Hazel, and maybe it saved the world." The words hit her harder than the storm, harder than the fear. She had opened her door to a stranger because her mother had taught her that kindness mattered, even when it was inconvenient, even when it was dangerous. And now, standing in the dawn light of an airplane graveyard, she realized just how far that one choice had reached. Hazel held Lily close, her heart pounding, her spirit unbroken. For the first time, in a long time, she allowed herself to believe in hope. 6 months later, Austin felt like a different world. The storm was a memory now, but its aftermath had rippled far beyond shattered windows and flooded streets. Across the globe, something greater had been set in motion. The suppressed technology Keanu carried on that tiny flash drive had been unveiled to the world, and for the first time in decades, ordinary people felt like they could breathe again. Hazel saw the difference first in her own apartment. The humming of old appliances no longer brought with it a pit of dread in her stomach. Her electric bill, once a monster that ate half her paycheck, had dropped to almost nothing. The city had installed new, clean energy grids, powered not by fossil fuels, but by a system so efficient and so accessible it was nearly free. For a woman who had spent nights counting crumpled dollars to keep the lights on, it felt like a miracle. At the diner, Rosie joked that Hazel's smile had grown brighter. And it wasn't just her. Customers came in with stories of how their neighborhoods were changing. The air smelled cleaner, fresher. Families walked together without the choking fumes of traffic hanging overhead. Even the sky itself seemed lighter, as though carrying less weight. But the real joy was in Lily's eyes. Her school, once underfunded and struggling, now thrived with new resources. Computers in every classroom, playgrounds rebuilt, teachers paid fairly and teaching with renewed energy. Hazel watched her daughter come home each day with new books, new projects, and a sense of wonder that had been dulled by years of scarcity. Lily's laughter, bright and unrestrained, filled their small apartment with something money could never buy: hope. Each night, Hazel tucked her daughter into bed and told her the story of the storm. She told it not as a tale of fear, but as a reminder of the power of choice. The night they opened their door to a stranger. The night kindness turned into courage. The night everything changed. Hazel noticed that the world outside her own window wasn't just shifting, it was transforming. News channels no longer brimmed with stories of blackouts or skyrocketing utility bills. Instead, reporters spoke with excitement about cities once drowning in smog, now seeing blue skies for the first time in decades. Villages that had lived in darkness were lit with affordable, endless energy. The technology was spreading faster than anyone expected, because people demanded it, and because those who once tried to hide it could no longer suppress the truth. But amid the change, Hazel carried a private reflection. She often thought of Keanu, wondering where he was now. She hadn't seen him since that dawn, at the airplane graveyard, when helicopters carried the mercenaries away and Agent Martinez had quietly taken Keanu into protection. He had smiled at Hazel and Lily one last time, a smile full of gratitude and weariness, before disappearing into the custody of those who would shield him. Hazel never knew if she would see him again. Yet every time her daughter asked, "Do you think he's okay, Mom?" she would answer softly, "Yes, Lily," because people like him are never truly gone. They live in what they've given. The words became truer each day. The clean energy wasn't just saving money. It was saving lives. Hospitals ran more efficiently, farmers powered irrigation pumps in remote fields, and children studied under bright lights instead of dim candles. Hazel felt connected to something bigger, something she never imagined being part of. She had once thought her life was small, confined to long shifts and overdue bills, but now she understood. Her small act of kindness had played a part in reshaping the future. Still, she remained grounded in the ordinary. The bills may have vanished, but she still worked shifts at Rosie's diner. She still walked Lily to school, packed lunches, and reminded her to do her homework. What had changed wasn't her life's routine. It was the weight of fear that no longer clung to it. And for Hazel, that difference meant everything. That night, after a long day of work and school, Hazel tucked Lily into bed. The little girl curled beneath her blanket, her hair still damp from a bath, eyes heavy with sleep, but bright with curiosity. "Tell me the story again, Mom," she whispered. Hazel smiled softly and sat at the edge of the bed, brushing her daughter's hair from her face. She told it as she always did, not as a tale of danger, but as a reminder of what courage and kindness could do. She spoke of the storm that raged outside, the night a stranger knocked on their lives, and the choice they made to open the door. She told Lily how that decision, small and simple, had changed everything. "It wasn't about who he was," Hazel said gently. "It was about who we chose to be. And sometimes, Lily, choosing kindness when it's hardest is the bravest thing of all." Lily yawned and snuggled deeper into her pillow. "So, we're heroes too?" Hazel's throat tightened, and she nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. The kind of heroes the world needs most. The ordinary kind, who don't turn away." As Hazel switched off the lamp, she lingered by the doorway, watching her daughter drift into sleep. The air outside carried a cool freshness, as if the earth itself was breathing easier. And in that stillness, Hazel felt peace. Not because the world was perfect, but because she knew hope was alive in it again. The story of the storm wasn't just theirs anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever wondered if one small act could matter. And Hazel knew the answer was yes. So she turned the question outward. To anyone listening, have you ever helped a stranger when it mattered most? Because sometimes, the fate of the world doesn't change in grand gestures. It changes in a single moment of compassion, when someone chooses to care.